Deep in the mountains, where snow never fully melts and the wind carries ancient secrets, there lived a tiny wolf named Shadow. He was different from other wolves, small, forever looking like a cub. But Shadow had learned something powerful. Being small didn't mean being weak, it meant being smart, resourceful, and above all, it meant surviving on his own terms. This is one of Shadow's stories, a story about compassion, choice, and the strength it takes to help someone, and the courage it takes to let them go. Welcome to Silent Wolf Stories, where every tale reminds us that the smallest hearts can teach the biggest lessons. Spring had arrived in the mountains. The world was waking up after a long, brutal winter. Flowers pushed through melting snow. Birds sang from tree branches. New life was everywhere. Shadow watched it all from his favorite lookout point, a flat rock that overlooked the valley. He'd survived another winter alone, another season of hunting, hiding, and enduring, and he was proud of that. Shadow had built a good life for himself in these mountains. He knew every trail, every hiding spot, every hunting ground. Other wolves avoided these peaks, too steep, too cold, too isolated. But for Shadow, that was perfect. Isolation meant safety, meant no one could judge him for being small. No one could abandon him. No one could hurt him. He'd learned that lesson well, and he had no intention of forgetting it. One morning, while checking his usual hunting route near a half-frozen stream, Shadow heard something that made him stop, a sound that didn't belong. Weak, desperate, a whimper. Another wolf was nearby, and they were in serious trouble. Shadow's first instinct was to walk away. Other wolves meant complications, meant getting involved, meant risking the peaceful solitude he'd worked so hard to build. But something about that sound pulled at him. It wasn't threatening, it was dying. Shadow stood frozen for a long moment, ears twitching toward the sound. Every instinct told him to leave, to mind his own business, to protect the life he'd carefully constructed. But another voice, quieter and deeper, whispered something different. It whispered about the day he'd been left behind, about crying out for help that never came, about what it felt like to be alone when you were dying, and Shadow couldn't walk away. He followed the sound through thick underbrush, over fallen logs, until he reached a small clearing bathed in morning light. And there, collapsed in a patch of blood-stained snow, was a small white wolf. She was tiny, almost as small as Shadow. Her back leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. She'd clearly been there for days, too injured to move, too weak to call for help anymore. When she saw Shadow, terror filled her silver blue eyes. She tried to drag herself away, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Shadow approached slowly, carefully, making himself as non-threatening as his small size allowed. The white wolf watched him with fearful, exhausted eyes. She was shaking, expecting attack, expecting the end. But Shadow didn't attack. He just sat down a safe distance away and looked at her, really looked at her, and saw himself, saw the cub he'd been, alone, abandoned, left to die. And in that moment, Shadow made a choice that went against everything he'd taught himself about survival. Shadow stood and disappeared into the forest. The white wolf's eyes filled with resignation. She thought he was leaving, thought she'd die alone after all, just like she'd expected. But 10 minutes later, Shadow returned with a fat rabbit dangling from his jaws. He dropped it in front of her and stepped back. The white wolf stared at the food in disbelief, then at Shadow. Why? Why would a stranger help her? Shadow didn't have an answer. He just knew what it felt like to be left behind, and he wouldn't wish that on anyone. The white wolf ate slowly, painfully. It was clearly her first meal in days. Shadow kept his distance, watching the tree line for predators. When she finished, she looked at him with those silver eyes and whispered one word: Luna, her name. She was telling him her name. Shadow hesitated. Names meant connection. Connection meant caring. But he found himself responding anyway. Shadow. Luna's eyes softened. Thank you, Shadow, she whispered. and something in Shadow's chest, something he'd kept frozen for so long, began to thaw. Shadow stayed that day, and the next. Not because he wanted to get attached, but because leaving Luna alone meant she'd die. And Shadow had decided he wasn't that wolf. Wasn't the kind who walked away from someone in need, even if staying meant risking his own peace. He hunted for two, which was exhausting for his small body. He kept watch while Luna slept. He brought water. He kept predators away, all while telling himself it was temporary, just until she healed. Then he'd go back to his life, alone, safe, the way it should be. As Luna's legs slowly healed, she began to talk. At first, Shadow tried not to listen, didn't want to know her story, because knowing meant caring more. But Luna's voice was gentle, persistent. She told him about her pack, about being born the smallest, about the winter when food was scarce and hard choices had to be made. "They left me because they had to," Luna said quietly. "I understand why, but understanding doesn't make it hurt less." Shadow knew that feeling, knew it deep in his bones. "How long have you been alone?" he asked before he could stop himself. Luna looked at the sky, calculating. 3 months. "I survived pretty well, actually, until I fell." She gestured to her leg. "Stupid mistake. Wasn't watching where I was going, and then I thought it was over." She looked at Shadow. "Until you came. Why did you help me, Shadow? You don't know me. You owe me nothing." Shadow was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Because someone should have helped me. When I was left behind, when I was dying in the snow. Someone should have stopped, should have cared. But no one did." He met her eyes. "I survived anyway, but I never forgot what it felt like. And I guess I couldn't let you feel that way, not if I could help it." Luna's eyes filled with tears. "You're not as alone as you think you are, Shadow. Not in spirit, not in heart." 2 weeks passed. Luna's leg grew stronger each day. She could walk now, hunt small prey. She was healing, which meant their time together was ending. Shadow knew this, had known it from the start, but knowing didn't make it easier. He'd gotten used to her presence, to her gentle voice filling the silence, to not being completely alone. And that terrified him, because caring meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant eventual pain. One evening, as they shared a meal under the stars, Luna spoke the words Shadow had been dreading. "My leg is healed, Shadow. I can hunt again, travel again." She paused. "I could stay, you know. We could travel together, hunt together. 2 small wolves surviving together. We're good together." Shadow's heart clenched. Part of him wanted to say yes, wanted to grab onto this connection and never let go. But another part, the part that had been abandoned and learned to survive alone, knew better. "Luna," Shadow said gently, "you don't want to stay with me. I'm not meant for companionship. I live alone because it's safer that way. Easier. I can't worry about anyone else. Can't be responsible for anyone's survival but my own. It's how I've made it this far." Luna looked at him with understanding in her silver eyes. "You're afraid," she said softly. "Afraid of caring. Afraid I'll leave like they did, like everyone did." Shadow looked away. "Maybe, but fear keeps me alive, keeps me focused. I help you because it was the right thing to do. But staying together? That's different. That's..." He struggled for words. "That's asking me to be someone I'm not anymore. I was part of a pack once. I trusted them, loved them, and they left me to die. I can't do that again, Luna. I can't let myself care that much just to lose it." Luna was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved closer, pressing her forehead against his. "Shadow, thank you for saving my life, for teaching me that kindness still exists in this cruel world, for showing me that being small doesn't mean being helpless." She pulled back, eyes glistening. "But I understand. I understand that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is protect our own hearts. And if being alone is what you need, then that's what you should do. The next morning, Luna stood at the edge of Shadow's territory. Her leg was strong, her spirit renewed. She looked back at Shadow one last time. "Will you be okay?" she asked. Shadow nodded. "I always am." Luna smiled sadly. "I hope one day you find what you're looking for, Shadow. I hope you find peace. Real peace, not just survival." And with that, she turned and walked into the forest. Shadow watched her white form disappear between the trees, watched until he couldn't see her anymore. And then he was alone again. Shadow returned to his rock, his lookout point, the place where he watched the world but stayed apart from it. He should have felt relief, should have felt the comfort of solitude returning. But instead, he felt something else. Not regret exactly, but awareness. Awareness that he'd helped someone, that his small size hadn't made him powerless, that even someone as tiny and alone as him could make a difference in another's life. And that meant something. Days passed, weeks. Shadow returned to his routines, hunting, surviving, being alone. But something had changed. Sometimes he'd catch himself looking toward the direction Luna had gone, wondering if she was okay, if she'd found a place to belong. And he'd realized that caring for her hadn't made him weaker. It had reminded him of something he'd almost forgotten. That compassion wasn't weakness, that helping someone didn't mean losing yourself, that you could be strong and alone, but still choose kindness when it mattered. One quiet evening, as Shadow lay on his rock watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and purple, he thought about everything he'd learned, about survival, about strength, about what it meant to be a lone wolf. He'd thought being alone meant never needing anyone, never helping anyone, building walls so high nothing could hurt him. But Luna had taught him something different. Being alone was a choice, but it didn't have to mean being heartless. He could survive on his own and still help when someone needed it. The two weren't opposites. They were both forms of strength. Shadow looked up at the emerging stars. Somewhere out there, Luna was looking at the same stars, living her life, surviving, thriving maybe. They'd crossed paths for a reason. She'd needed help, and he'd had the strength to give it. And then they'd both moved on. No promises, no attachments, just two small wolves who'd helped each other in a moment when it mattered, and then had the courage to walk separate paths. Shadow curled up in his favorite sleeping spot, a small hollow beneath an ancient pine. He was alone, would probably always be alone, but he was okay with that now, because being a lone wolf didn't mean being cold, didn't mean turning your back on everyone. It meant being strong enough to survive alone, but wise enough to help when you could, and brave enough to let go when the time came. Shadow had done all three, and that made him not just a survivor, but someone who chose his own path with intention, with purpose, with heart. The mountains grew quiet as night settled in. Shadow closed his eyes, listening to the familiar sounds of his territory. The wind through the trees, the distant call of an owl, the gentle rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. This was his world, his home, his life, and he'd chosen it, not because he was afraid, but because it was who he was, a tiny wolf with a huge spirit, a lone wolf who knew that sometimes the greatest strength wasn't in staying together, it was in knowing when to walk alone. This is Shadow, the small wolf who learned that compassion and solitude can exist in the same heart, that helping someone doesn't mean losing yourself, and that sometimes the most beautiful connections are the ones we have the courage to release. His journey continues, one day at a time, one choice at a time, small but mighty, alone but never truly lonely, because he carries with him the knowledge that he is enough, exactly as he is, and that is everything. If Shadow's story touched your heart, follow Silent Wolf Stories, because there are more tales to tell, more lessons to learn, more moments that remind us that being small doesn't mean being insignificant, and that every act of kindness, no matter how brief, leaves a mark on the world. Thank you for walking with Shadow today. Until the next story.